Russia has formally annexed 4 Ukrainian territories in a ceremony that reminded many of the Crimea annexation of 2014. There was pomp and grandeur as Russian President Vladimir Putin walked in through the golden doors. He signed the decree formalizing the annexation of 4 main regions. He slammed the West for their colonial mentality. He even held hands with the leaders of these 4 territories, chanting Russia.
The people have made their choice. It's a clear choice. Today we will sign the agreement for People's Republic of Donetsk, the People's Republic of Luhansk, and the region of Zaporizhia, and the region of Kherson to become part of Russia. I believe that there will be federal and constitutional support for the 4 new regions to become part of Russian Federation, and that is because this is the will of millions of people.
The annexed regions include Donetsk, Luhansk, Kherson and Zaporizhia. Now, this is a major chunk of Ukrainian territory that Russia is now calling its own. Along with Crimea, they account for 20% of Ukraine, and this makes it the largest annexation of land in Europe since 1945. Donetsk and Luhansk were already ruled by Russian-backed separatists. Meanwhile, Kherson and parts of Zaporizhia have been controlled by Russia. Shortly after the invasion began in late February. Last week, Russia conducted referendums in all 4 regions, referendums that have been called a sham by Ukraine and the West. According to Moscow, the response was overwhelming. It says that an overwhelming majority wanted to join Russia. The annexation means Russia now stakes its claim on 100,000 square kilometers of land. They are now calling these regions a part of Russia. Liberating Donetsk and Luhansk were Putin's goals in the so-called special military operation. But that's not the only reason why these regions are crucial. This is Ukrainian land that is heavily industrial. It contains rich farmland and will also be a critical channel to Crimea. However, Russia does not fully control any of the 4 regions for now. Most of Luhansk is in Russian hands. But as for Donetsk, Moscow only controls 60% in all 4 regions. The war is raging on the front lines. The capital of the southern region of Zaporizhia is under Ukraine's control. On the other hand, a counter-offensive is currently underway in Kherson. Putin has also called the annexations non-negotiable and permanent. In fact, he said that citizens have made their choice and now these regions are Russian territory. The Kremlin has already said any attack on these territories will be an attack on Russia.
We call on the Kyiv regime to cease firing and stop all the military activities immediately, including the war it launched in 2014, and to come back to the negotiating table. We are ready to do this, as has been said on many occasions. But the choice of the people in Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhia and Kherson areas is not up for discussion. It has been made. Russia will not betray.
So what happens next, now that the annexation has been announced? Well, the Russian president has delivered his speech. He has signed the documents. Reactions are only just pouring from around the world. Volodymyr Zelensky has already said that Ukraine will not negotiate with Russia as long as Putin remains in power. The Constitutional Court will now have to approve the annexation and then it goes to the country's parliament. The State Duma will then amend the constitution, increasing the size of the Russian Federation. The process is likely to be completed on the 4th of October, just 3 days before Putin's 70th birthday. And with me on the broadcast this minute from Moscow is Fred Vier, who is a Russian affairs expert. Thanks very much for being here on the broadcast. What, according to you, are the implications of this move by Russia. What would you say this really means for the Russia-Ukraine war at this point?
Well, that's a very big question, and I myself am not clear why at this time Putin has taken this step. It was always in the cards that occupied territory in eastern Ukraine would probably be sooner or later integrated into Russia. But why now, when these are all four regions are active war zones? There is a desperate battle now occurring in the Donetsk Republic around the city of Krasny Liman, where the Ukrainians are on the offensive. In Kherson, there is a constant battle every day, and the Ukrainians are threatening counteroffensive there. This is a very tense time on the battlefield, and it's not clear why this step was taken, this referendum was carried out, but it certainly has the effect of stiffening Russian resolve. Putin has pretty much laid down the gauntlet, not just to Ukraine, but to the Russian people. He's saying this is now Russian territory. The regular army will now be required to go to the front line and fight and defend as if that were the state border of Russia. This is a very, very big step, and it's hard to know what the implications are down the road.
Right. Now, let's talk about the timing of this move, Fred. It comes at a time when there are protests in Russia against Putin's partial mobilization plan, and this expression of dissent, such expression of dissent is extremely rare in Russia. At the same time, Russia has faced setbacks on the ground in Ukraine. So what do you make of the timing of this move in the context of these developments?
Well, I think Putin is steaming ahead. This is what I said. He's making this irreversible, and all Russians are going to have to defend those territories as if they were defending their own homeland. The reason there is protest is because the partial mobilization that Putin announced transforms the character of the war for the average Russian. Until now, the last 7 months, it's been about 200,000 troops fighting down there in Ukraine, but they're all volunteers, contract soldiers, and militias of Donetsk and Luhansk republics. It's like people, not a professional army, paid people. The average Russian got used to the idea that the war was on, but that it didn't really affect them or their families. This mobilization, and especially the chaotic way it's being carried out, makes almost anybody's son or husband or father eligible to be called up. And that changes everything for people. And so we've seen, like a lot of people, I wouldn't overestimate the numbers, but thousands of draft dodgers making for the exits. There are very few borders they can cross these days, so that's why it seems probably like more of them than there are. But still, it's a lot of people who want to get out of the country rather than fight in this war. On the other hand, you do see on Russian TV pictures of recruitment centers filled with people being called up and coming and receiving their kit and getting on buses to go to their deployment points. So the mobilization is happening, and probably most of the people being called up are coming. And that will also signal a new war down the road, not immediately, but when the mud season is over, December, January, when the ground freezes, right, probably we can expect that Russia will go on the offensive with this new force, which I think basically will double the size of the forces that they have down there. And they'll probably be using much more aggressive tactics too.
All right, Fred, we're leaving it there for the moment. Thanks very much for joining us.
My pleasure.
And we're also at this point getting in Alexey Gromchenko from Kiev, who is a member of the Ukrainian parliament. Alexey, thanks very much for being here on the broadcast. I want to ask you for your reaction to what we have witnessed today, the move and the announcement by the Russian president, and how exactly is Ukraine viewing this?
It's nonsense. For us, it's absolutely nothing. It's worthless. We don't accept it. Nobody in the world will accept it. It's just a show by which Putin tries to cover his military failures, because just at these hours, and when he was standing in Kremlin saying all these absolute nonsense that he was telling for 30 minutes, at this moment, Ukrainian army encircled Russian units in Liman in Donbass, which is a strategic town, and thousands of Russian soldiers and officers are now encircled. And this is the best answer from Ukraine on the battlefield, because we will never give up our territories, and we will never leave Ukrainian people under genocide, because Russia is committing genocide against Ukrainians on occupied territories.
What do you make of the fact that this move comes at a time when there have been protests on the ground in Russia against its invasion of Ukraine? Domestic support in the country has been under scrutiny. At the same time, Russia is suffering those setbacks on the ground in Ukraine.
That's why I'm saying this is a gesture of desperation from Putin. He's really desperate. And he tries now with this propaganda-style event to show some victory and to show that the regime is stable and solid, rock solid, but it is not. It is melting on our eyes.
Right. At the outset, you said that this is a move that the world will not tolerate or accept. But let's talk about the kind of support that Ukraine has received from the world and also the West. We have seen the Russian president going ahead with such a move in spite of the pressure and the sanctions on part of the West. How would you assess the kind of support that you've received from the United States, from the West at this point?
We are very thankful for all support we received, and this support is vital for us. And sure, without this support, it would be much, much more difficult for us to win this war. So we are thankful, and we hope there will be more support from the world, because Putin showed that he is insane and he doesn't want any de-escalation and he doesn't want any peace, because this move with the annexation of our territories is a move to more escalation. So the only way to stop it is to defeat Russia on the battlefield.
Right. In the latest coming in, Alexey, Ukraine has also formally applied for NATO membership now. Tell us more about why and how important this really is for Ukraine.
It is important. It is in our constitution that Ukraine wants to become a member of European Union and NATO. And now we will send officially our request to join NATO. And in reality, we are already allies with the NATO countries, and we are fighting not only for ourselves, but for the whole free world, for all free countries in the world, because it's Putin's war against Ukraine. It's a war of autocracies against democracies. And we are absolutely in one camp. So it's time to acknowledge it officially, and Ukraine should join NATO.
Alexey, we'll leave it there for the moment. Thanks very much for being here.
Thank you.
WION now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.